Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the Sports Corner at Choose Adventure Media. My name is Zach, and in tonight's episode, we will be recapping the Oregon Ducks win over the James Madison Dukes in the first round of the college football playoffs. On the surface, it looks like a big win for the Ducks, but obviously if you watched it, you know that the picture is a little bit murkier than that. The Ducks came out really firing, looked great on both sides of the ball, looked great on special teams, and then come the second half, they seem to have lost a little bit of focus. So in tonight's episode, I'll be talking about how worried should Ducks fans actually be going into the quarterfinal matchup with Texas Tech. As always, I love to hear from you guys in the chat, so let me know, what were you guys disappointed in? What were you impressed by? What do you guys think? Do you guys think that Ducks fans should be worried? Are they going to be able to take on Texas Tech? Is the layoff going to affect Texas Tech too much? Would love to hear from you guys as always. So let's jump right into it. So my overall takeaway from the game is I think that this game honestly was a microcosm of the Oregon Ducks season itself. If you think about, there was a lot of talent by the young guys, right? There were a lot of impressive, flashy plays. D.R. Hill had a great game. Jordan Davison had a great game. Dante Moore obviously had some amazing throws. Absolutely looking like that number one overall pick potential in the NFL draft come April. And then there were the moments that definitely show the age of this team being rather on the young side. There were a couple of cocky throws that Dante made that ended up being interceptions. The defense got burned. Ife Obadegu got burned a few times. And then on the other side, Brandon Finney got burned a few times. And then there were just, loss of concentration in tackling. And against a team, James Madison's a very well-coached team. They may not have the 5 stars and the 4 stars that Oregon has, but they're incredibly well-coached. They're disciplined. And so you can't just, stop tackling in the second half. They're going to take advantage of that. They have a lot of talent. Their running back is extremely talented. They have an extremely talented linebacker. Like I said, they're very well coached. So that's why when the Ducks started to ease up a little bit and when they started to lose a little bit of concentration, that's why James Madison was able to take advantage. In terms of public perception, I'm not hitting the doomsday button yet. I think that Oregon is absolutely the team that played in the first half, but they're also the team that played in the second half. And I think that absolutely was a concentration issue. I think the Ducks got up big, started looking forward, especially whenever they started to sub out the starters. I think it's absolutely just a concentration thing, which, again, when you're dealing with 18 to 22-year-olds, this is bound to happen. I mean, look at Oklahoma last night. Oklahoma last night was up 17-0 on Alabama. Lost concentration, ended up giving up the game, and ended up losing at home. So obviously the Ducks didn't do that. Yes, they didn't cover. So if you're one of those people that gambles on the over-under, you're probably a little frustrated. But assuming that you bet on the Ducks to cover. However, in the grand scheme of things, like the announcer said at the very end of the game, this stage of the season is survive and advance. It doesn't matter if you win by 1. It doesn't matter if you win by 100. Survive and advance. I'm sorry, just gotta check on my stream stuff. Okay. So I was extremely impressed by Dante Moore tonight. I think he played extremely well. I think he was very decisive. I think, again, like I said, he was embodying those traits of an NFL quarterback. He's playing with great anticipation. His arm talent's there. His poise is there. He has a phenomenal footwork. He had a few bad balls. Like there was one in the first quarter, I believe, that generated the defensive pass interference. And then, like I said, towards the end of the game, I think Dante even started to lose a little bit of concentration, particularly with those interceptions. Those weren't great. That was, again, reminiscent of what we saw. Like I know in the Northwestern game in the second half, he lost focus and took a chance that he shouldn't have and threw an interception. And that's why Dante Moore isn't overwhelmingly this number 1 overall pick. And that's why there's this debate that he may come back to college, is because he's only started he started 5 games at UCLA, and tonight was his 13th start, so 18 starts total. That's gonna happen when you have a guy that's only started 18 games. He's gonna lose focus. He's only 20 years old, and that's why there's a very high likelihood that he comes back to Oregon. And I think this playoff run will kind of determine what exactly happens there. And honestly, I think tonight's performance is a great indicator that he is going to come back to school, just because a lot of the Ducks players, they didn't look like professionals, right? Like, think about your job. Like, it doesn't matter if you've gotten 8 tasks done that day. You're a professional. You're going to sit at your job and you're going to work at the exact same pace with the exact same veracity and the exact same pace as the first task of the day. And it's this like the college kids, they weren't, right? However, if you watch the NFL, it doesn't matter how much time is left in the game. The professionals stick to the script, and the professionals continue to do their job no matter the score. And I think a lot of NFL teams have been burned by quarterbacks with, not a ton of starts relatively. I mean, look at Jaden Daniels was in the, I believe, 40 or 50 start range. Bo Nix was in the 50 start range. Dylan Gabriel was in the 50 start range. But then you have guys like Anthony Richardson, who I believe started only 12. And so I think with recent history, I think there's been enough people getting burned by quarterbacks with not a ton of experience that ultimately is going to, depending on how you look at it, benefit Ducks fans in encouraging Dante Moore to come back for a second year. I mean, even Fernando Mendoza, he started last year at Cali, started this year at Indiana. He's going to be somewhere in the 24 to 26 start range at least. And Dante Moore, again, let's say they beat Texas Tech, he's still going to be 19 there. So the semifinals will be 19. If the Ducks make it to the championship, that's only 20 starts. So depending on the NFL franchise, they might want him to play more consistently. And I think, honestly, like, if we look at maybe the Minnesota game or the USC game, those are really the only 2 games that Dante Moore has played a complete game. Got a chat. I want to address Chewbacca with Cheese 242. Tosh should just go to Cal now. We don't have his full attention here at Oregon. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. I think I think a lot of the loss of focus was on the players. The Ducks were running their typical offense, and it was just Tosh Lupoy is not out there making tackles, right? Like, he's not, he's not out there, blowing coverages. And so I'm not necessarily in the camp that Tosh should just go to Cal now. Because I think this is absolutely a symptom of dealing with 18 to 22-year-olds. I will say I'm not thrilled with Will Stein's play calling down the stretch in the fourth quarter. If you want to talk about whenever the Ducks were in the red zone, or right before Atticus kicked that field goal at the end, I agree. Will Stein, he showed, and I don't even know if it's a loss of focus. I think it's what we've seen throughout the season from Will Stein, and what I've been critical of Will Stein's at certain points throughout the year, of just because stuff starts to not work doesn't mean you should ultimately revert back to screenplays and only, stuff behind the line of scrimmage. Like we saw tonight, and we have seen countless times throughout the season. This team is an elite down the field passing attack, and also has an amazing run game as well. So do that. Don't have one stuffed run or maybe one incomplete pass and then revert to swing passes. Like, give this team a chance. They play better when they're aggressive. Like, there's certain things in life that whenever you're more aggressive and whenever you're more pressing, like, things just work better, versus if you're trying to slow boat your way, it can make things a lot harder. It's like if you're trying to draw a circle, right? Like, if you try to go really slow and draw that circle, most of the time you're going to draw a really crappy circle. However, if you just do a quick little, circle, most of the time it ends up being pretty decent. And I think that's kind of how this Oregon offense operates. They're not great at going slow. Like, they are phenomenal at working with tempo, being aggressive, attacking downfield, using, the track team that we have at the outside weapons. So like I'm saying, I don't I'm not going to blame the coordinators here. Particularly if you look at the first half, this team was absolutely locked in. And that's why I'm not worried about Oregon playing Texas Tech in 11 days, is because the team that played in the first half was phenomenal and absolutely can win a championship. Yes, I know it's against James Madison, but Jeremiah McClellan played out of his mind and isn't getting enough credit. Like, he had 3 highlight level catches almost. On the one where he got injured, well, not injured, but banged up a little bit, that absolutely would have been a highlight reel catch if he actually would have completed it, but he didn't complete it only because he got banged up. His touchdown catch was phenomenal. He had towards the end of the game, he had a great play where he broke a ton of tackles. I'm so impressed with Jeremiah McClellan and Malik Benson, and I was so happy to see that just because Dacorian Moore and Gary Bryant Jr. were back, I'm so happy to see that they didn't kind of fade into the background and automatically assume a lesser role. It's why I love this Ducks team so much, and why I think this Ducks team is so dangerous, not only this year in this playoff run, but I think they're so dangerous moving forward as a culture of just, if you're playing well, you're going to get the ball. If you're good enough, you're old enough to play. Like, I think that's so forward thinking and is such a dangerous culture for teams across the country, not for Oregon, but for teams across the country. If I'm a high level recruit or I'm a high level transfer, and I know that if I'm good enough, I can go play right away. It doesn't matter if there's 2 other 5 stars in front of me. It doesn't matter if there's a 60-year senior in front of me. If I put in the work and if I have a great week of practice, I'm going to get reps. And I just love that culture. I think it's incredibly forward thinking. I think it encourages competition in a healthy way, not in a toxic way that unfortunately we see too often in sports. And also, I think it's ultimately best for the athletes because they don't go somewhere for 2 years to sit, because that's the plan, and then they get on the field their 3rd year and then realize they're not good enough to compete at that level, and they just wasted 3 years of their life ultimately. I think it's so fair to the athletes. I think it's such a great way to build a roster, as we've seen with Dan Lanning, and his ability to not only evaluate talent, but to accumulate talent. And just overall so impressed with Dan Lanning's roster building techniques. And that's why I'm not worried about, the Texas Tech game. And also, maybe I'm just being way too optimistic here, but I'm looking at this as an opportunity of, if Oregon would have won 80-0 over James Madison, what notes do you give your team for 11 days of 18 to 22-year-olds? Seriously, like what do you say to them for 11 days through Christmas and New Year's and got to travel to Miami? What do you tell them? So I'm honestly kind of happy that this happened. There's going to be a lot of teach tape. There's going to be a lot of sprints run by these Ducks. Like, man, I do not want to be on that team the next few days with all the sprints they're going to be running. Whatever punishment they do. I don't know if they have a hill. I don't know if they do burpees. There's going to be some punishment. And also, I just want to also point this out. Like, I always read the Ducks subreddit. I read the game thread for the game while, I'm taking my notes and stuff. And there were a lot of comments that I don't know if people realize is a little, how do I say this? Lack of awareness. And so one of the comments was towards the end of the game on that final drive when Jordan Davison was running, and he grimaced a couple of times, but it's because the camera is zoomed in on his face. And someone said, can't the coaching staff see he's clearly hurting? They should just take him out. And it's like, no, they don't have a camera that's zoomed 6 inches away from his face. Like, they can't tell that their player is hurting. And unless he taps his helmet and says, please take me out, unless, it's built into the game plan, they're not going to take him out. I think that's right up there akin to, why didn't he just go for the yellow line that's on the field with a first down marker? Like, from the coach's perspective, you can't necessarily see everything that the camera on the field, the million cameras on the field, can actually capture. So yeah, just keep that in mind. Okay. So the opening drive, I think looked incredibly explosive. It looked a lot like, I don't know if you guys watched the Ole Miss Tulane game, looked a lot like that, with just unstoppable. Everything was working. Yes, the players bobbled a couple of catches, but they ultimately caught them. And that's why I'm saying it's not a complete concentration issue, and it's not a skill issue. They just lost focus in the second half. And that happens when you're dealing with 18 to 22 year olds. Like, everyone's praising the team earlier on in the year with being talented and young and youthful and yay, true freshmen and redshirt freshmen, woo. This is what happens when you know, in situations like this. This is the one downside of working and operating with an extremely young team. And then on the converse, James Madison's a very experienced team, because teams at that tier, let's be honest, kind of have to be experienced. You know, they're not going to get 4-star, you know, true freshmen. So Jamari Johnson had an amazing catch. It was a great, he juked the defender on the route, and then Dante was able to find him. Dante, great ball placement, and Jamari Johnson, even better catch, and a phenomenal effort to get into the end zone. Again, that's why I'm saying the effort shown by Jamari Johnson on that one play shows it's not, they weren't playing down to their opponent the entire game. They took them very seriously. So the potential is there. It's just staying locked in. And again, I think that's just a maturation in life thing. So this is a great opportunity for those players to realize you got to be locked in for 60 minutes at this level. Doesn't matter if you're playing the 12th seed and they're James Madison and they're from the Sun Belt. You got to be locked in for 60 minutes. You know, Tim Tebow and the national championship against Oklahoma, at halftime, you know, he went up to his team and said 30 minutes for the rest of our lives, 30 minutes for the rest of our lives. And it's like, that's kind of where we're at. If you want to cement your legacy, and if you want this to be, you know, a legendary Ducks team, you got to treat every game like 60 minutes for the rest of your lives. You know, I know it's a little melodramatic. However, I mean, it ultimately worked out for Tim Tebow, right? Went on to beat Oklahoma 24-14 in the national championship. I think Dante's decision making early on was phenomenal, and you know, when I was watching him early on, I was thinking, okay, he's gone. You know, like this game, he's phenomenal. He used his legs appropriately. He had made great decisions. He was looking off safeties and moving people in zone. He has phenomenal ball placement for man coverage. You know, footwork, mechanics, like he's got everything. He's got the size, he's got the poise. Tonight, he didn't even have to show his ability to throw on the run, which I think is arguably his best trait, is throwing on the run. You know, I thought he was gone, but then it's that second half happened and he made, you know, I think the first interception is kind of 50-50 on him and on Benson. I think he got a little cocky with the window, and I think it was a little bit of a miss on Dante's part. But then the second interception was absolutely just cockiness. You know, pressure's closing in. Again, that guy wasn't open. And I know he got hit when the ball got thrown, but still, not a good throw to make. You eat that sack, you move on to the next play. And I think, honestly, if he was playing Indiana, if he was playing Ohio State, I think he would have ate that sack and lived to another down. But again, I think that's where we kind of started to see the focus wane of, okay, we're playing James Madison. We can kind of do things we can't do against Ohio State and Indiana. I think James Madison honestly deserves a lot more credit. I think, you know, even in the way that I've started this live stream, I think it's a little unfair how people are blaming this all on a lack of focus on Oregon's part, and not giving James Madison enough credit for staying locked in. You know, you can't diss one team for not staying locked in and then not give credit to the other team for staying locked in, even though they were down by what, you know, I know they were down by 35 at some point. So huge shout out to James Madison. Somehow throughout all these coaches, you know, every year their roster gets poached in the transfer portal, and yet they consistently are able to succeed. I don't know what that is. I don't know if that's great athletic department or, you know, athletic directors. I don't know if that's great facilities. I don't know what that is, but consistently, you know, forever at whatever level James Madison is able to produce. James Madison has heart. Chewbacca with the cheese said in chat, JMU has heart. They were a worthy opponent. I agree. And again, not as an Oregon Ducks fan, but as a college football fan, I'm actually kind of I'm happy this happened, because I would be worried that if Tulane lost by 31 to Ole Miss, right? I think something like that, and then if James Madison would have lost by 35 or 42, I think there would have been a lot of people screaming for the Group of Five doesn't deserve a college football playoff bid. And while I don't think the current system is perfect either, I do think that the Group of Five deserves a playoff spot. I was thinking about it earlier, and I haven't given this a ton of thought because I thought of it during the game. But I would almost be fine if that was the only guarantee. Like if the Group of Five got one guaranteed spot and nothing else. Like whatever shenanigans happens in the ACC, whatever shenanigans happens in the SEC, the Notre Dame bias, whatever. Like, I think college football is so dynamic from year to year, and that's what makes it so great. So I have a little bit of a hard time with there being a ton of guarantees with the postseason format. Except I do think the Group of Five deserves a spot every year. We saw it last year with Boise State putting up a fight. I think they deserved to be in the playoff last year. I think James Madison absolutely earned their spot this year. And even Tulane, in that first half against Ole Miss, they were putting up a fight and they were able to move the ball. And if Jake Retzlaff doesn't throw that interception in the first quarter, and they convert that fourth down again early on in the first quarter as well, that's a completely different ball game. So I like Chewbacca with the cheese said in chat, JMU has a lot of heart, and I really hope that the Group of Five continues to have representation in the playoff, because I think every year there's at least one Group of Five team that has a lot of heart that can do what they did to Oregon today. Look at what the 2020, it was like January 2nd was the bowl game of 23, but the 2022 season was Tulane beat USC 46-45 in the Sugar Bowl. And it's like, in the playoff format, those teams, I believe, would have both been in the playoffs. So just proving that one of these times a Group of Five team can pull off the upset. LMAO JMU got 509 yards on the Ducks. Yep, they absolutely did. You're absolutely right. They lost focus. Look at the age of the team. Like Ife Obadegwu, redshirt freshman. Brandon Finney, true freshman. Aaron Flowers, redshirt freshman. All these guys have so much youth, and earlier on in the season, we were celebrating that youth, and we were, really celebrating it moving forward. However, this team's going to show immaturity at some point. It's just bound to happen. They can't be perfect true freshmen. They're not made in a lab, right? So yes, they gave up 509 yards. However, in the first half, when they were truly locked in, they gave up 197, 126 passing and 71 rushing. They, compared to the Ducks, had 360. So, 1 point. They showed it against Northwestern also. Yeah, they did. Exactly. And, I was also mentioning earlier, I don't know if you're here for this, GBR captain, Dante Moore. I saw very reminiscent of that game in particular, of the horrible interception that he threw. It was a deep ball, and it was, I think, double covered, and he just threw a bad ball. He got really cocky. And I think that's what his interceptions were tonight. Yes, the first interception also could have been blamed on Malik Benson, but I think the second interception absolutely also was just cockiness. Yes, he got hit when he threw it, but again, yes, I agree with you completely. They showed it against Northwestern. They showed it again tonight. Point number 4, Oregon's so explosive, and I think that's going to translate against Texas Tech. I don't want to give it away too much. I think Texas Tech's a little overrated. A win is a win, though, and that is what is important. Agree with you completely, GBR captain. Absolutely agree. At this stage, we're at win in advance. That's all that matters. I don't know if any of you guys play golf. In golf, they say it's not about how, it's about how many. It doesn't matter if you skip a ball across the water, bounce it off a tree, hit a sprinkler. If it goes in the hole in one shot, it's a hole in one, right? That's what's on the scorecard. That's where we're at right now in the playoffs. I'm extremely happy with how explosive this team played in the first half. And I think that's going to translate really well against Texas Tech, and honestly moving forward in this playoff run. I was a little worried that this offense would kind of shrink down to only focusing on DeCorian Moore and Gary Bryant Jr. And it's like, I thought maybe like this offense could only function with 2 wide receivers, 1 tight end, and a couple of running backs. But no, like really, this is what we saw earlier on in the year against an Oklahoma State, against Montana State, against Northwestern in the first half, is truly that whole disperse the wealth mentality is legit, and it presented itself tonight. I haven't pulled up the box score, so that's going to take a little bit. So Chewbacca with Cheese also just said, while I pulled that up, how do we match up with Texas Tech? Haven't watched them. Honestly, on paper and in theory, the teams are very similar. So Texas Tech doesn't have as explosive of a quarterback. Baron Mortensen is a good quarterback, but no one's talking about him as a potential number 1 overall pick. And I don't think he has the NFL talent that Dante Moore has. But in terms of being a good college quarterback, he absolutely is. They are also really known for their defense. If you haven't already, I have a great video on my channel that I posted in the off season about the transfer portal class that Texas Tech has. And that's not just a shameless plug. That is me trying to mention the point that Texas Tech brought in a phenomenal transfer portal class. They have some great guys on the defensive line. That's really where they make their bread and butter, is the defensive line and having a dominant defense. And then they're able to kind of capitalize on that with an explosive offense. I'll get more into that in just a sec. I just want to finish my point on the distributing the wealth point. Pulling up the box score. Yeah, so in terms of receptions, Malik Benson, 5 receptions, 119 yards. Jeremiah McClellan, 6 receptions, 83 yards. Jamari Johnson, 1 catch for the 41. De'Aaron Hill, the 1 catch for 40 yards. Kenyon Sadiq, 2 for 19. Really quiet night. I want to touch on that more later. Noah Whittington, a reception. DeCorian Moore had a reception. Jaden Lamar had a couple of receptions. So again, I was so, and again, the rushing attack we saw again, granted, I know there was a lot of garbage time, but I was so happy to see the use of 6, or no, I guess technically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 running backs and Dante Moore on the 5-yard touchdown run. Just thrilled to see that. I think that's so sustainable, not only for this playoff run, but I just think that's when this offense operates at its best, is just, not focusing on any one guy. And I think that's going to have to be the attack with Texas Tech moving forward. And so, like I was mentioning, Texas Tech, I think on paper and in theory, is very similar to Oregon. They have a great defense, but they also have an explosive offense. And right now I'm pulling up the NCAA stats to kind of drive home that point. So again, in terms of scoring offense, Texas Tech is second with 42.5 points per game. Oregon was ninth with 38 points per game. With scoring defense, scoring defense. I agree. So, scoring defense, Texas Tech is third in the country, only averaging just under 11 points per game giving up, and Oregon is ninth, giving up about 15 points per game. Again, whenever you look at these teams in a very broad view, they're going to look very similar. And that's why the broadcasters were kind of touching on it, of they don't really know how this game's going to go. It could really be a defensive struggle and both defenses do really well, or it could be an old school Big 12 game of a high powered shootout. GBR captain says, I think the defense can get some turnovers against Texas Tech. I noticed the speed difference at the beginning of the game. I think Ducks defense is a little bit stronger. I agree. And I think as a whole, I think the Ducks team is just a lot faster than Texas Tech. I'm just not sold on Texas Tech. I think they've been overrated all year. I just think the Big 12 hasn't been very strong at all. And they didn't have a very impressive schedule. And then I also do want to get to N5 IFI's point, what happened? Did you guys play the spark plugs in the second half? 509 yards. Yes, I know that they gave it 509 yards. In short, I think the young team that we've been celebrating all year, I think just lost focus. Like this is going to happen, like they showed. GBR captain brought it up. Lost focus in the Northwestern game. It's going to happen. They got to win. That's what matters. So Texas Tech, they played BYU, they played Arizona State, and the typical, typical Big 12 stuff. But like non-conference, they played Arkansas Pine Bluff, they played Kent State, they played Oregon State, and then they won at Utah. That was a big dominant win, and I was thinking for a moment maybe this team is legit, but then they went to Arizona State and lost by 4. And Arizona State, man, Arizona State has a lot of talent, but man, they were kind of a dumpster fire this year. They were all over the place. And then just, they beat BYU, which, again, I also thought BYU was a little overrated this year. And they beat BYU twice, beating them again in the Big 12 championship game. I'm going to look up some other stats. But I know one of the guys that I talked about in my Texas Tech video was a Quentin Joyner. He was a running back from USC, and I was really excited to see what he could do, but he got injured in training camp, I believe. Let's look up passing offense. Passing offense again. So Texas Tech is actually the 10th ranked passing offense at 289.4 yards per game. When Oregon is 47th at 246 yards per game. So Texas Tech, really explosive passing offense and rushing offense. Rushing offense, Texas Tech is 27th at 190 yards per game, when Oregon is 13th at 218 yards per game. So the guys to look out on for Texas Tech, like you said, didn't exactly. Yeah. And I know Oregon gets a lot of criticism for not playing anyone, and this could be its own video. I think the win at Penn State is still a perfectly legitimate win, and I think was an impressive win. I think the win against USC was impressive. I think the win on the road against Iowa was impressive. Honestly, I think the win at Washington was just as impressive as beating BYU. That's going to be a really hot take. Exactly, GBR captain. I think honestly, if you're going to give Texas Tech credit for beating BYU, I think Oregon should get the exact same amount of credit for beating Iowa and Washington, both of those wins. Texas Tech depth chart. Okay, so with that explosive passing attack, their big wide receivers are Caleb Douglas. I believe he's a transfer from Florida. I'm pretty sure he was at Florida forever and then transferred there a couple years ago. Yeah. Caleb Douglas, big body, 6'4", 205 pounds. And then they've got some great transfers on the offensive line with Howard Sampson from North Carolina and Will Jados. But it's like I mentioned earlier, the defensive line is really what I think has made this team and gets a lot of the attention. David Bailey, Jordan Just Better said Oregon going to beat Texas Tech. I agree completely. So Texas Tech, their big defensive linemen are David Bailey. He's getting a lot of NFL draft hype. Lee Hunter, he's just a great person off the field. I know maybe some of the Oregon fans aren't really looking for this right now, but he's a phenomenal guy. Is smiling all the time and just really positive. Did the Ducks? Yes, the Ducks did come out of this game without injuries. There was one that they said, Theron Johnson, and Dan Lanning, as usual, he was a little ambiguous with his answer at his press conference when asked, is he going to be okay? Dan Lanning said, I think he should be okay. So Theron Johnson's the only injury, which he's one of our third or fourth string corners. So I don't know, I don't know how impactful that will be, but Jeremiah McClellan came back in the game. I think Jordan Davison was wincing at the end, but he never came out. And I think it was just because it was cold. And of course, if anyone's played football in the cold, you know that falling to the ground hurts a lot more when it's 40 versus 70. And I think that's all it was just kind of cold stingers almost. But Romello Height, I think, is also a phenomenal edge player for Texas Tech. I've always kind of thought that Texas Tech's secondary presents some opportunities to be attacked, much like Oregon. While Oregon on paper has a phenomenal passing offense, I think if anyone's watched Oregon, you know that it's kind of a weak point. Oregon is the 47th best passing, or I'm sorry, that's passing offense, right? Yeah. Pulling up passing defense. Do not do passing defense anymore? Oh, pass yards allowed. There it is. So Oregon is technically third in the country with 144 yards per game allowed. That's the third fewest. When Texas Tech is 25th with 185 passing yards per game. I just really think that that's a great opportunity for Oregon to attack, and I think that's going to be one of the major keys if the Ducks are going to beat the Red Raiders in the quarterfinals. Is we need the first half Will Stein that we saw tonight. If stuff doesn't start to work out, please don't abandon it. Like, be the Will Stein we saw against Iowa, that we saw against Minnesota, we saw against USC, not the one we saw against Wisconsin. Not honestly the one that we saw against Rutgers or Indiana. Like, be aggressive. Realize you have a track team for a wide receiver core. You have a freaking action figure for a tight end at Kenyon Sadiq. You have Jamari Johnson, who would honestly be way more talked about as a first round tight end if he was on any other team in the country. Like, you have so many explosive weapons, so just make them go to work. Like, make them defend them. Part of the reason why Indiana was able to defend the Ducks so well was because they played zone coverage. And at the time, Will Stein wasn't calling plays appropriate for zone coverage. He learned how to do that. Tech had the 67th strength of schedule. Again, middle of the road. I don't know what Oregon's strength of schedule was. I don't have a good website for looking that up. So GBR Captain, if you have one, I'd love to hear it. Schedule, college football rankings. Resume, strength of schedule. There it is. So Oregon actually had the 16th strength of schedule. Is that right? In football this year? Huh. 44th ESPN. All tournaments. Weird. I'm looking at ESPN under the resume portion, and it has Oregon as the 4th ranked strength of record, and for strength of schedule it says they're 16. Don't know what that's about. I agree. I think Oregon would be somewhere around the 44th. I believe that one more than 16th on strength of schedule. Anyone in the comments, if you want me to go over difference between strength of record and strength of schedule, let me know. I'd be more than glad to talk about that. But if we look at overall efficiencies, Oregon ranked, at least according to ESPN, Oregon ranked 4th in overall efficiency. Texas Tech ranked 3rd. Offensive efficiency, Oregon ranked 4th. Texas Tech ranked 22nd. Defensive efficiency, Texas Tech ranked 1st. Oregon ranked 5th. Showing that Tech gave up 39 sacks. Jeez. That would be a phenomenal opportunity. If that's the truth, I would love that. Let's do sacks allowed. I think that is on the NCAA website. I don't know. I'm looking on the NCAA stats, and it's saying, where is it? Texas Tech gave up 23, at least according to the NCAA website, which is still, 69th. So, that's also a great opportunity. We know that Tosh Lupoy is able to let his guys pin their ears back. Kind of talking about tonight's game. Dante got bored and got careless. Yep. Not concerned about the D. Tech is legit, so we'll see. Vegas line, Texas point favored by 2. Maybe I'm biased. Sam Kim, 39-23. I'm taking that line. I've never, like I've been saying, I've never really thought Texas Tech was that good. I was really happy when the playoff brackets were kind of starting to get finalized and we saw that the Ducks might be playing Texas Tech in the second round. I think that's a really favorable matchup. So kind of the Texas Tech 2 biggest weaknesses. The one on offense is, thanks to GBR captain pointing this out, they're giving up a lot of sacks with that offensive line. Tatum Tuioti, Amari Washington, Bear Alexander, Matayo Uyagalele, have entered the chat. I think they can absolutely go nuts. And then the Texas Tech pass defense isn't stellar. And again, they never played a super elite passing offense. They were kind of middle of the road as a passing defense. So I really think that Oregon can take advantage of those two things if the play callers call the right plays. Ducks can get this game against Tech. I agree. I've been talking about it all year, and I don't know if anyone has been watching my live streams all year, but it's really, I think Oregon, Indiana, and Ohio State, when they're all playing their best, are in a completely different tier than the other teams. I've been saying that all year. Yes, Oregon's been wildly inconsistent this year. There's no doubt about that, and I completely agree that they didn't earn a higher seed than the 5th seed. However, I'm not really worried about any teams that aren't Indiana and Ohio State. If Oregon doesn't play their best ball and Texas Tech plays their best ball, absolutely, Texas Tech could win. But if Oregon plays the way they did in the first half tonight, I would even, I like that team in a rematch against Indiana. I'm so high on this Oregon Ducks team, and just the problem is that their elite is as good as it gets. But if they don't play that, they're going to struggle, just like any team. But because of the youth, it causes a little bit more inconsistencies, and that's the biggest kind of Achilles heel of this Oregon Ducks team. Is what makes it so wonderful is its youth and its athleticism. Is also its Achilles heel with its Achilles heel. Is also its Achilles heel with its inconsistencies. Yeah, I absolutely agree. To be fair, Tech won't be any scarier than Iowa or Penn State when they cared. Exactly. Or USC. I think USC is very much on par with Texas Tech. Yes, Texas Tech has a better defensive front, but also So I agree. I completely agree with Sam Kim's point in chat. To be fair, Tech won't be any scarier than Iowa or Penn State. Iowa has literally one of the best offensive lines in the country. The Ducks played phenomenal run defense against them. At the time, Iowa had one of the best rush defenses in the country. I'm going to look it up now. So it's, a few games later. But if we look at the best rush defenses in the country, where's Iowa? Iowa was up there. Okay, so Iowa is now 24th, giving up 112 yards per game. Oregon, I think, went for over 200 against them. James Madison is the second ranked, and Oregon kind of had a field day with them. Oregon went, Washington was the 13th ranked rush defense at 100 yards per game. Wisconsin, 105. So what does that mean? Of the top 24 teams, Oregon has already gone for 200 over what, 3 of them? So yeah, I agree. How they won at Iowa was awesome. I think this team is so versatile, and I think they can win in a lot of different ways. They can win a big slug out physical fest like that, or more of how they kind of air things out, kind of like the first half tonight. They were just completely airing it out. This team is so versatile, and so they can take advantage of teams however they need to, and that's why I think they've got to be a really hard team to prepare for. Because they have so many playmakers. You can't just focus on one guy. You can't just focus on one area of the field. It's not like they, just run inside zone or they just do outside runs. It's like, as soon as you start to bite down on the runs, they're able to take advantage with some deep passes down the field. With Dante Moore, I think throwing the best deep ball of any quarterback in the country easily this year, maybe that I've personally ever seen in my lifetime. Sam Kim said Iowa win only happens because Dante's ghost pass to set up the field goal. Okay, that pass was amazing. Like, there's exactly one spot on earth that ball could have been, and it was right there. It was on time, and that's what makes Dante so impressive, is like, he has elite arm talent with great mechanics and great footwork, and he understands timing incredibly well for a guy with only 18 starts. But he can also play out of structure like we saw against Penn State. I'm gonna look up I wonder the money line for Oregon Texas Tech. Like, what are they projecting the special teams is a very important part of Oregon's game. I agree. Like, I feel like the first part of the year, I don't know. I take that back, because didn't Noah Whittington have a kick return for a touchdown earlier on in the year? I just feel like once Malik Benson started returning kicks, I feel like that really unlocked something even more. Like, I think our kickoffs returns were great. But then I think, like, ever since Malik Benson's been returning kicks, this sounds bad, but thankfully due to injuries, I think it's really unlocked something, and it's really dangerous. I was thinking about it in the Miami game when I was watching Malachi Toney, and how impressive and just how important it is. Even if you can get 9 yards on a punt return, like, that's huge, man. Like, they punt it to the 15 and you're able to get it to the 24, or they punt it to, the 20 and you're able to get it to almost to the 30. Like, that's huge, man. Like, and so Malik Benson, I think, has been that guy for the Ducks ever since he's been returning punts. So this was from a couple days ago, but it looks like... So this is saying, as well, on DucksWire on USAToday.com, according to FanDuel Sports at the time, Oregon is opened as a 1.5-point favorite over Texas Tech. The over-under listed at 51, so they're projecting like a 27-20 or like a 26-25 game. What do you guys think? So the over-under is 51.5. I agree, GBR Captain. I'm so over. Love Dan Lang to death. Love him to death. Please, can we just kick field goal, extra points? Can we please just kick extra points? I beg. That's what I want for Christmas. Please, Dan Lanning, for Christmas, give me just one game with just some normal extra points. Like, that's all I want. That's all I want. Like, if you're going to go for 2, I love the aggression. Do it. Do it. But please, man, just line up all 10 guys on the line, on the ball, snap the ball, kick an extra point, boom, you're good. On to the next. Like, oh, man. It gives me an unnecessary amount of anxiety. FanDuel. Oregon. Texas Tech. I like that. I think it's going to be a little bit higher. I think it's going to be higher than a 26-25 game. And at least right now, it's showing, FanDuel is showing Oregon as a 1.5-point favorite and a over-under now of 52.5. So, okay, a 27-25 game roughly. I agree. GBR captain, I think it's gonna be a little bit higher than what's expected. I don't gamble, but if I did, I'd be putting money on the over, and I'd be obviously putting money on Oregon to cover the spread and win outright. I'm gonna do more research throughout the week, but as of right now, I could see a 38-31 game. Maybe a 38-28, something like that. But the defense may actually come up bigger. But I think I think it's going to shock the country what Oregon does against this Texas Tech defense that has a whole lot of hype around it. With Jacob Rodriguez got Heisman votes as a linebacker. I may be putting my foot in my mouth in 11 days, but I'm not, like, I think a player really has to be special, and it should be in a special club to be a defensive player that's even in the top 10 for Heisman votes. I just don't think Jacob Rodriguez is that. I think he's a great linebacker, but like, is he, the Manti Te'os? Is he the Charles Woodsons that obviously won one? Is he Travis Hunter? No. Like, he's not even an Aiden Hutchinson. Like, he's not in that club. So I really think that this Ducks defense, or this Ducks offense, is going to make a statement against this Texas Tech defense and is really going to shock a lot of people. I think the Ducks are going to play more of what they played in the first half tonight. I agree. Honestly, so GBR captain said, I am thinking with a couple of turnovers over sacks on defense will prevent Tech getting into the 30s. Yeah, I agree. I could see that. My biggest concern from the game tonight was the lack of generating a turnover. But honestly, James Madison is just a well-coached team. But yeah, that was honestly my only, I wish we would have generated a turnover tonight. And so, yeah, I think the Ducks absolutely can. If they do, if they get a couple of turnovers and a few sacks, which it sounds like they will, compared, at least based on the large number of sacks that this Texas Tech offensive line has given up throughout the season. I absolutely see that point, GBR captain. So 38-28, 38-24, something like that. Again, in 11 days, you may see me put my foot in my mouth. Cameron Scott 5147 says, I've been saying this, and Ducks fans who are unrealistic and ignorant. There's no way you allow damn near 40 points and 500 plus yards to JMU, regardless of backups in. Yeah. Without any context, I agree. However, if you put out a team of, if Ohio State loses focus, they would have given up 40 points and 500 plus yards to JMU. Like, it's just, this team is so young, and I'm not excusing it. What I'm trying to say is, I'm not worried about it. This team played a complete game against Penn State and, played every snap. And again, I know it's a hot take. I think that's a perfectly good win. This team played a complete game against USC. This team played a complete game against Washington. Oregon has blue chips recruits 4 and 5 star players as backups that are still getting paid millions of dollars to ride the bench and can't cover a nosebleed. Yeah, I mean, I agree. However, it was just a lack of focus. Like, Aaron Flowers is a good tackler, and he missed multiple tackles in the second half. Dylan Thieneman was missing tackles, and I didn't see him miss a tackle the entire season. Brandon Finney was giving up too many yards in pass coverage. Ifeoma Degwu wasn't playing awesome. We didn't see Bryce Betcher in the second half, and he's one of our best, or at least his name wasn't mentioned a ton. Yes, Oregon does have a lot of talent. However, this team is a very young team, and if you put any 19, 20-year-olds in anything that they do, they're going to lose focus if they're up. If the situation is the equivalent of up by 35 at home in the playoffs against a lesser opponent, that's going to happen to anyone. So I'm not worried about it. Where was I? Well, I'm gonna look at the stats maybe from tonight's game. I don't think I actually looked at what the stats ended up being. Oh, by the way, love the duck, all the costumes. Like he was Uncle Eddie from. Cameron Scott says, if Ole Miss gave up the same amount of points and yardage to Tulane, people would be laughing stock of CFB. There's no universe where OSU nor Georgia with backups allow 34 points and 500 yards to JMU. Okay. We'll see. Honestly, I wasn't impressed with Ole Miss's defense against Tulane. If you're looking at the box score, yes, it's impressive. But I mean, if you actually watch the game, Tulane was able to move the ball. Like, Tulane was 2 plays away from that being, 14-17 at the end of the first half. So Ole Miss's defense, very overrated. And how many yards did they actually end up giving up? Tulane, Ole Miss. Okay, so Ole Miss still ended up giving up 421 yards to Tulane. So what, 80 yards difference? Yes, it's 20 points, but 80 yards difference. Come on now. Come on. Okay, GBR Captain says, right now the Ducks are on to Texas Tech and JMU's in their review mirror. Exactly. It's on to the next game. 4 very good playoff matchups coming up. I type in playoff bracket and I'm surprised when, the college football playoff bracket doesn't come up. Football. Okay. So which matchups are you guys most excited about? Obviously, we've been talking about it a little bit. Oregon, Texas Tech match up very well on paper and from a bird's eye view. They are very similar teams. However, I think Oregon is the better version of that team. I think Oregon's going to be able to exploit... the Texas Tech offensive line and the Texas Tech secondary, and I think that game is going to be a great statement win for the Oregon Ducks. Alabama pulls out a weird game against Oklahoma. That's the only way I know how to describe it. I don't think anyone actually won that game. I think people just lost it better. GBR Captain, I don't know which game you're talking about. 30-3 or something like that earlier, and the 99-yard drive at the end was pathetic. Oh, was that the Ducks game tonight? Have I already blanked that? Yeah, you're right. I mean, at halftime it was 34-6. And yeah, the 99-yard drive at the end was pathetic. It absolutely was. Penalties were bad. Dante Moore's interceptions were absolutely inexcusable. The defense was really bad tonight. I'm not that upset with the offense. But yeah, the defense was really bad. They couldn't get off the field on 3rd down to save their lives. James Madison went 4 for 4 on 4th down. Gave up, 509 yards, 323 yards through the air, 186 yards passing to James Madison, over 5 yards per carry. And that was with 13 penalties for 113 yards in some pretty crucial situations, multiple, goal to go situations. James Madison had the ball for 35 minutes. Yes, defense was horrible. However, if you watch the first half, and if you take into consideration this is a young team, it's a completely different storyline. Cameron Scott says the final score is what matters, not how many points they were up by. Be realistic, man. People made the excuse last season, and you see what happened. OSU put BTA 34-0 in the second quarter as number 1 seed. Yeah, I mean, we'll see. This is why they play the games. This is why they don't just look at stats and box scores and determine the winner. So yeah, I mean, we'll see. I agree. It's not about how many points they were up by, but if you watch the game, Oregon dominated James Madison, and Oregon, made James Madison, really took away their will. Take away that final drive and kick the PAT. Yeah, 52-26. Oregon all season gave up most yards and points to James Madison. James Madison still moved the ball in Oregon first half. Wide receivers dropped what should have been scores, if we're being honest. Okay. We can play a coulda, woulda, shoulda game all night. Like, you can't be saying coulda, woulda, shoulda for James Madison and not be playing coulda, woulda, shoulda at the exact same time. Like, what if James Madison drops the interceptions? Like, come on. Like, we're not playing coulda, woulda, shoulda. It's hard to take Oregon seriously defensively when they couldn't even force a fumble or interception on a team. They were clearly better than. Oh man. Okay. All right. In other news, I'm going to look up some more stats just to kind of get the gauge on what kind of team Texas Tech is. I do think a worrisome point, dude, you could bet your house on, okay. I do think that Oregon's third down defense has been a little concerning for a few games now, and it looks like Texas Tech is pretty good on third down in terms of offense. They convert about 50.5 percent of their third downs. And yeah, GBR captain made a great point. The JMU game was a great warm-up game for Tech. Like Dan Lanning has been preaching ever since they lost to the Ohio State game. I don't think the layoff is good. These are 18 to 22-year-olds, and they go home for the holidays, and I think they leave their brain at home. And so I'm really happy that the Ducks got this 5 seed. They got a great warm-up game against JMU. They made a lot of mistakes. The defense didn't play well. And there's going to be a lot of coach tape to go over in the next 11 days versus a situation where they win by 50 and there's no coachable points. So really excited and happy that this happened, and I like the layoff. There was already 3 weeks, between their last game against Washington, the game today, and then there's gonna be 11 days. It's more than a normal week, so any banged up stuff is gonna be able to heal up. They can practice. We might get Evan Stewart back. That's super exciting. Trey McNutt made his appearance tonight, and if any of you guys have been watching my channel since the offseason, you know that I'm a big Trey McNutt fan. Not only on the field, but I think off the field, he's a stellar young man as well. Cameron Scott 5147, Oregon is soft, on top of more coulda, woulda, shoulda stuff. We'll find out. We'll find out exactly how soft Oregon is. But I don't think it's productive, nor honestly not insane to be talking about coulda, woulda, shoulda. Like, anyway. And yeah, so I haven't actually looked at these statistics, but Oregon, in terms of a defense of allowing third down conversions, I may have missed them. The NCAA stat website isn't awesome. Okay, Oregon is 28th at allowing 34.3. And man, every time I look at these stats, Oregon and Texas Tech are so similar. So if we look at the third down defense. So how many conversions Oregon gives up on third downs? Oregon's giving up a 34.3, which is 28th. Texas Tech is 12th at giving up 30.8%. Again, on paper, these teams look very similar. I just think Oregon's the better version. So for the other matchups, what are you guys excited about? So outside of the Oregon game, what matchups are you guys most excited for? Do you guys think Alabama has a chance against Indiana? Do you guys think Miami has a chance against Ohio State? Do you think Ole Miss has a chance to beat Georgia in the rematch? In terms outside of the Oregon game, and the most likely upset, I think I'll go with. I think I'll probably go with Ole Miss. I think Georgia. I don't feel it's appropriate to say Georgia's been overrated this year. I just think they've maybe been struggling a little bit more than people wanted to admit. I think they absolutely earned the 3 seed, but is this Georgia team like the team from last year? I don't think so. I think they're about a half step below. So in terms of most likely for the upset, I think it's going to be Ole Miss over Georgia, but that's also just a testament to what I think of Indiana and Ohio State. They're phenomenal football teams. Obviously Alabama and Oklahoma last night, honestly, both of them should have been excluded from the playoff, or at least eliminated. Like, the playoff committee should have just said, you know what? None of y'all deserve to win. Like, they were giving that away as hard as they could. And so I think Indiana will take care of Alabama pretty easily. Ohio State, Miami. I'm really excited for that game because I think both defenses are phenomenal. I'm glad to see Miami play the defense that they did today. Was very reminiscent of how they were earlier on in the year. Malachi Toney, such a fun player to watch. I think the coaching matchup with Cignetti and Alabama connection is great. And if Kurt and Kirby meet up, that would be awesome. Huh. That would be awesome. That'd be a great national championship. Obviously I'd be a little bummed because then it means Oregon's not in the championship. But yeah, Kurt Cignetti, Kirby Smart. That's an exciting matchup. We've already got Kurt Cignetti and Ryan Day this year, and that was great. Don't get me wrong. But man, Kirby and Kurt, that's a fun game. Okay, outside of the Oregon Ducks making the national championship, that's the national championship I think I'm hoping for. Man, I think Ohio State, Miami, that's going to be a good game. That's going to be a really good game. I really like Miami's defense. And I think their offense played good enough today. Honestly, I think A&M and Miami were two of the best defenses left in the playoff. Maybe Ohio State, I could see being better. If you argue that Ohio State was better than both of them definitively, I'm not going to argue with you on that. But Miami and Texas A&M, I think, were probably the second and third best defenses. So that's going to be a really interesting matchup. What are y'all's thoughts on what the Miami defense is going to do against Julian Sand? Are they going to be able to rattle him? Can they shut down the explosive weapons of Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate and Brandon Ennis and, all the other freaking first round NFL draft picks that they're going to end up with at the wide receiver position? Great run game with Bo Jackson. But that's a really exciting matchup to me. And outside of the Oregon Texas Tech game, that's probably the one I'm most excited to watch, because those are two really extremely physical teams. So I think that's just going to be a massive slugfest. Really excited to watch that. Man, Alabama against Indiana. Let me think about that. So Alabama's off defense didn't look awesome, and so the announcers in the Alabama-Oklahoma game were really hyping up the Alabama defense, but it was like they were giving up sacks. Oklahoma was giving up sacks because they literally just didn't block. They didn't block the A-gap defender, or they didn't block the edge defender, and it's like it's a little hard to sell that as good defense if you're just not blocking the guy. Any team except for Cameron Scott, are you like a Husky fan or something? Like, oh man. I'm just realizing that Miami A&M game surprised me with that low score. I'm still trying to figure out if the defenses were just that good or both offenses had a bad game. I agree, and I really only watched the second half of it, but to me, the second half was good defense. Miami's so freaking physical, man, and Texas A&M's too. But man, they've got some guys in the secondary that are just huge and physical. And then on top of the guys up front with Basainth and who's the other guy that they're projecting go high? Ruben Bain. And Akeem Mesidor, Wesley Basainth, OJ Frederick Jr., all these guys on the Miami defense, man, they're dangerous. They're extremely dangerous. And I think that's going to be a really fun game to watch. It really just all comes down to, you know, what can Carson Beck do? Mark Fletcher, the running back from Miami, near did everything he could to literally carry that team on his back to get a win. But they got CJ Daniels, the wide receiver transfer from LSU. He's so fun to watch. Big physical wide receiver that loves to run block. Obviously Malachi Toney, just such an explosive weapon. Really, really fun Miami team. Yeah, I don't know what happened to Texas A&M. I think that's the curse of Texas A&M. People want to talk about it, but the way they lost to Texas and the way they lost to Miami, man, I think, I agree. That was a really shocking game. I wouldn't have put money on it being that low. Like, if you told me it was a low scoring game, I'm like, okay, what, like 17-14? Like, okay, I'll buy it. But like 10-3? Like, what? Like, I thought Marcel Reed would at least be able to get some more points than that. Especially they got Le'Veon Moss back. They have some phenomenal weapons at wide receiver and Concepcion. And they have another one, and I can't think of his name right now. But yeah, I agree. I was really, really surprised that game was as low scoring as it was. And I don't know if I can quite say. Yeah, I agree. Ohio State's defense is phenomenal. They've been playing at a historic pace, and honestly, I think they should be getting just as much credit as Georgia's defense did between 2021 and 2022. I think Ohio State deserves just as much attention. Like, I'm just as impressed. Particularly their red zone defense is phenomenal. Literally putting up a historical pace. Caleb Downs is a really fun player to watch. Sonny Styles. You got the edge guys. Ohio State depth chart. Caden Curry is fine. Kenyatta Jackson. Caden McDonald has been playing well for them. Arvell Reese. Davison Igbinosun. All right, had enough of that. All right. Yeah, Ohio State's defense deserves a lot of credit, and I agree. GBR Captain just says probably a lot of NFL players on that defense. They already put a lot of players into the NFL last year from that defense, and that's why I made a video in March, and I said I don't know if Ohio State can repeat as champions. And, I said that they would be a good team and that they would probably make the playoffs. I don't know if I saw them repeating. Man, the way they were able to reload, especially with homegrown talent. Again, a lot of people really wanted to hate on Ohio State last year, saying that they only, built their team from the transfer portal and all that. If you look at their starters, it's like they have, 3 or 4 transfers, and one of them's Caleb Downs, and, This is his second year there. They're saying Davison Igbinosun is a transfer? I didn't know that. Oh, he's transferred from Ole Miss. I didn't know that. But there's a lot of really homegrown talent on this Ohio State defense. And the way they've been able to produce through multiple different defensive coordinators, through obviously 2 different years, with all the turnover that they lost last year, I really think in a couple of years, I think people will be looking at the Ohio State's defense these last 2 years in the same way that they look at the Georgia defenses with, Nakobe Dean, Jalen Carter, Jalen Walker, right? He was the number 1 overall pick. Trayvon Walker, right? Yeah, Trayvon Walker. Wasn't Devontae Wyatt in that group, the guy for the Packers? The way that they were able to just produce all Keely Ringo, like all this NFL talent that Georgia was able to produce those couple of years, I think this Ohio State defense can really be in that exact same league. So I think I'm going to call it a night. As always, please make sure to like and subscribe. I'll be doing a live stream also after the Oregon Texas Tech game. I'll probably do a live stream as a preview, or I'll at least do a video preview as well. So make sure that your post notifications are turned on for that. I'd greatly appreciate any like and subscribe. My name is Zach with the Sports Corner at Choose Venture Media. I hope you guys have a great holiday season, and be on the lookout for more content, more live streams. Have a good night. Let's see.